The air in the ancient monastery library in the Ethiopian highlands was thin, dry and heavy, with the scent of parchment aged beyond mortal reckoning, and something else, something indefinable, like the faint echo of forbidden knowledge that had been hidden for millennia because it threatened to overturn every comfortable assumption about angels, demons, and the true nature of divine revelation. A single shaft of early morning light filtered through a window, aligned with precision to catch the first rays of dawn during the spring equinox, illuminated a codex that rested on a reading stand of carved cedar wood, blackened by centuries. The codex was a complete copy of the Book of Enoch, not the fragmentary versions known to Western scholars, but a full text preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, containing sections that had been excised from other traditions as too dangerous, too revealing, too incompatible with the narrative that angels were purely good and humans were meant to remain ignorant and obedient. Upon the open page, written in Ge'ez script that seemed to shimmer with its own luminescence, was a passage that appeared in no other known version of Enoch, a prophecy that had been carefully removed from the canonical texts, but preserved here in the only place that had maintained the complete tradition. And the watcher called Azazel said unto me, Enoch, scribe of righteousness, I will reveal unto thee what the Most High has forbidden, what thy people are not ready to hear, that among us who descended to teach humanity the arts and sciences, there was one who came not to corrupt, but to complete, one whom the others called the Dragon Queen, who knew the serpent power within all beings, who taught the daughters of men not seduction, but sovereignty, not how to please men, but how to awaken the divine fire that makes humans like gods. And for this teaching she was most condemned, most demonized, most thoroughly erased from memory, because a humanity that knew the dragon power, especially women who mastered it, could not be ruled by heaven or earth. Before this text, a lone figure sat in profound stillness, their breath caught in their throat, their mind reeling with the implications of what they were reading, the suggestion that among the watchers, the fallen angels of Genesis, who had descended to mate with human women and teach forbidden knowledge, there had been a feminine presence, a being who had taught not corruption, but liberation, who had been written out of the story because what she offered was too transformative, too empowering, too dangerous to patriarchal structures both divine and human. What if the story of the Watchers, the angels who fell from grace for teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, was not about corruption and punishment, but about initiation and evolution? And what if among these teachers there was a feminine presence, called by some the Dragon Queen, who understood the Kundalini serpent power and who taught women especially how to awaken it, how to rise from unconscious servitude to conscious divinity? And what if she was erased from every version of the story, except this one, because the knowledge she offered, the power she activated in human women, was the most threatening thing imaginable to the patriarchal order that would shape all Abrahamic religion? What timeless secret did this forbidden passage preserve, and what profound revelation awaited the one who dared to reconstruct the missing story of the Dragon Queen among the Watchers, to perceive the delicate threads connecting Enoch's visions to the serpent wisdom that every orthodoxy had worked to suppress? My name is Lyra, and the call to something beyond had been a persistent whisper in my consciousness since the moment I first read the Book of Enoch as a graduate student and felt beneath the text about fallen angels and forbidden knowledge something deeper, something that the official interpretation as simple condemnation of rebellion and lust didn't capture, a sense that these watchers had been teaching something real and transformative, that their fall had been not punishment by a jealous God, but scapegoating by threatened religious authorities, and that among them there had been presences and teachings that the fragmentary texts we possessed only hinted at. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense, no audible instruction, but a deep knowing that the story as we had it was incomplete, deliberately edited, with crucial elements removed because they were too revolutionary, and that somewhere, in some tradition that had preserved more than the others, the full teaching might still exist. My journey began not with mystical experience, but with textual analysis, my doctoral dissertation comparing the various versions of Enochic literature across different traditions, the Ethiopian, the fragmentary Hebrew versions from Qumran, the Slavonic variation, trying to understand what had been preserved in some traditions and lost or removed from others. I discovered that the Ethiopian version was consistently longer, more detailed, containing entire sections absent from other sources, and that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had maintained Enoch as canonical scripture when every other Christian tradition had relegated it to apocrypha or rejected it entirely, suggesting they had preserved something the others had found too dangerous to keep. In recurring visions that began as I deepened into this research, I found myself witnessing not the traditional story of lustful angels corrupting innocent women, but something far more complex. I saw beings of light descending not to indulge forbidden desires, but to teach, to initiate, to accelerate human evolution by sharing knowledge that the Creator deity wanted kept secret because it would make humans autonomous, ungovernable, capable of becoming divine themselves. Among these teachers, I saw a feminine presence of such radiance and power that even the other watchers deferred to her wisdom, a being who understood the serpent power, the kundalini, the transformative fire that lay coiled at the base of every human spine, and who taught women especially how to awaken it, how to rise through the energy centers until the crown chakra opened and divine consciousness flooded through, making them not servants of gods or men, but sovereign beings in their own right. In these visions she was called by many names, Ishtar by some, Lilith by others, but the watchers themselves called her the Dragon Queen, because when she taught, when she demonstrated the full awakening of the serpent power, her light body became visible as a magnificent dragon of pure energy, coiling from her root to her crown and beyond, connecting earth and heaven through her transformed consciousness. The visions always ended with her being specifically targeted for demonization, her teachings being twisted into accusations of seduction and corruption, her name being erased from the records, while her power was attributed to demons and fallen angels and everything evil, ensuring that no woman would dare to follow the path she had shown, that no one would remember she had taught not how to fall, but how to rise. The path that followed these visions was one of intensive research across multiple traditions, trying to find any trace of this feminine watcher, any fragment that had survived the systematic erasure. I discovered that in Gnostic texts there were references to a Sophia figure among the archons, a feminine wisdom principle that some texts portrayed as fallen and in need of rescue, but that others portrayed as deliberately descending to teach and liberate. I found that in Jewish mystical traditions, Lilith was sometimes portrayed not just as demon, but as powerful initiator, teacher of forbidden wisdom to those brave enough to seek her out. I found in Mesopotamian sources that Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, was associated with the planet Venus, which is the morning and evening star, the light bearer, the same role attributed to Lucifer in Latin Christianity, suggesting a connection between the feminine divine and the knowledge-bringing fallen one. Each discovery brought resistance, both internal and external. There was the intellectual challenge of working with sources that academic tradition dismissed as mythology, not history, trying to reconstruct a coherent narrative from fragments and hints and visions that I couldn't prove came from anywhere but my imagination. There was the religious conditioning that insisted the watchers were evil, that their teachings were corruption, that any suggestion of a positive teaching role for them was demonic deception. There was the feminist complication of trying to reclaim a powerful feminine figure from a story that had been used to blame women for the fall, to justify patriarchal control, to paint female sexuality and autonomy as dangerous forces requiring male dominance. Yet there were also unexpected validations, moments when the research led somewhere that confirmed the pattern. A medieval Kabbalistic text that mentioned in passing the Queen of the Fallen Ones, who taught the serpent mysteries before the flood. An obscure Islamic commentary on the jinn that referenced a female teacher among them who had instructed human women in the raising of the inner fire. A Gnostic fragment that spoke of Sophia's emissary who descended to awaken Eve, teaching her that the serpent was not enemy but ally, that eating from the tree of knowledge was not fall but initiation. It was an Ethiopian monk, a scholar of his church's unique canon, who finally told me about the complete Enoch manuscript, the version his tradition had preserved that contained passages removed from all other versions. He said, "Our fathers kept what others destroyed because they understood that truth is larger than comfort, that the Most High's ways are mysterious, that what one age condemns another might need." The Watchers were not simple demons. They were teachers, initiators, revealers of knowledge that humanity needed to evolve, even though that knowledge threatened those who wanted to rule. Among them was one who taught especially the women, who revealed to them their own divine power, and for this she was hated above all others, her name cursed, her teaching forbidden. But we preserved the memory, knowing that someday, when the time was right, the Dragon Queen would need to be remembered again. When I finally gained access to the complete manuscript, when I read the passages about the Dragon Queen among the Watchers, the fragments of her teaching that Enoch had recorded before they were removed from other versions, something shifted in my understanding of the entire narrative of fall and redemption. The text was clear. She had not come to corrupt, but to complete, not to lead humans away from the divine, but to reveal that the divine was within them, waiting to be awakened. She had taught practices, specific techniques for working with breath and energy and consciousness, methods for awakening the coiled serpent at the spine's base and raising it through the centers that later traditions would call chakras or sephirot or energy gates. She had taught that this awakening was not automatic or easy, that it required discipline and courage and guidance, but that it was the birthright of every human. The potential that made them truly made in the image of the divine, not servants of God, but expressions of God, co-creators capable of continuing the work of creation. The text recorded her words to those she initiated. You were told that knowledge makes you evil, that aspiring to be like gods is the original sin. This is the lie of those who would keep you enslaved. The truth is that you are made to be like gods, that the spark of the divine is within you as the coiled dragon at your spine's base. And when you awaken it, when you raise it through the centers until it reaches the crown and bursts through in light, you do not fall from grace, but rise into it. You do not become demon, but remember you were always divine. They will condemn me for teaching you this. They will call me fallen, seducer, corrupter, queen of demons. But you who have tasted the fire, who have felt the dragon rise, you will know that what I taught was not corruption, but liberation, not fall, but flight. The text went on to describe how the other Watchers, even those sympathetic to teaching humanity, grew concerned about what the Dragon Queen was doing, fearing that she was moving too fast, awakening powers humans were not ready to handle responsibly, creating a generation of awakened beings who would challenge not just human hierarchies but heavenly ones. It described the debate among the Watchers about how much to reveal, how much to hold back, and the Dragon Queen's insistence that holding back knowledge for people's supposed good was paternalism at best and tyranny at worst, that consciousness wanted to evolve and that trying to keep it caged was both futile and cruel. And it described the response from the divine authority, the declaration that the Watchers had gone too far. that teaching the serpent wisdom was unforgivable, that the Dragon Queen especially had committed the ultimate transgression by empowering human women to be sovereign rather than subordinate, and the decision to end the experiment, to destroy the civilization that had been learning too well, to send the flood and start over with humans who would be kept more carefully ignorant, and to demonize the teachers so thoroughly that no one would dare follow their path again. If you want a practical, step-by-step explanation of the path of knowledge we're exploring here today, I've created a complete guide to help you apply it in your own life. You'll find the link in the description. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The climax of my journey came not through reading but through direct experience. A night when I had been fasting and meditating according to practices I had reconstructed from the Enochic text and other sources, asking not intellectually but with my whole being to understand what the Dragon Queen had taught, to know what her initiates had known. As midnight approached, as I sat in deep meditation, something opened, and I was no longer alone in my consciousness, but in the presence of a being of such power and beauty and terrifying sovereignty that I understood immediately why she had been demonized, why patriarchy could not tolerate her, why her memory had to be erased. She appeared not as external entity but as pattern of consciousness, as awakened possibility, as what a human becomes when the dragon fully rises. And she spoke not in words but in direct transmission of understanding that flooded my awareness. She showed me that the story of the Watchers was the encoded memory of an actual intervention in human evolution. A time when more advanced beings, whether from other planets or dimensions, or simply more evolved humans from previous cycles, had attempted to accelerate humanity's development by sharing knowledge and activating potential. She showed me that what the biblical narrative called corruption and fall had actually been initiation and transformation, that the giants born from the union of Watchers and human women were not monsters, but awakened humans whose capacities seemed superhuman to those who remained asleep. She showed me that her specific role had been to work with women, because the female body, with its natural connection to life force through sexuality and reproduction, had inherent advantages for awakening the Kundalini, and that women who fully awakened this power became so autonomous, so powerful, so impossible to control or dominate that they threatened every patriarchal structure, divine and human alike. She showed me that her demonization was not punishment by a just God, but scapegoating by a threatened patriarchy, that Lilith, Ishtar, the Dragon Queen, the serpent in Eden, all the demonized feminine figures of forbidden knowledge were memories of her and what she taught, twisted into warnings to ensure no woman would dare follow that path. And she showed me that the flood myth, the destruction of the antediluvian civilization, was the memory of how that experiment had been forcibly ended when it became clear that humanity was awakening faster than the controlling powers wanted, that the decision had been made to reset, to start over with a more carefully controlled revelation, to ensure that knowledge of the dragon power would be lost, or at least hidden in esoteric traditions where only the few would find it, and that the great crime for which she was most condemned was not teaching forbidden knowledge in general, but teaching women specifically that they did not need permission from gods or men to become divine themselves. When I returned to ordinary consciousness, dawn light was streaming through my window, and I was weeping, understanding now the full tragedy and triumph of the Dragon Queen's story, the tragedy of how thoroughly she had been erased and demonized, and the triumph that she had succeeded anyway, that the knowledge she taught had survived in fragments, in mystery schools, in practices preserved by lineages that guarded them through millennia, waiting for the time when they could emerge again. The weeks that followed were of profound integration and decision. I understood that revealing what I had learned would be controversial, would anger both religious fundamentalists who needed the Watchers to be demons and feminists who might see any attempt to work with biblical narratives as legitimizing patriarchy. But I also understood that the story needed to be told, that the Dragon Queen needed to be remembered, that women especially needed to know about this figure who had taught their ancestors that they were meant to be sovereign, not subordinate, divine, not demonized, powerful beyond any limitation imposed by patriarchal religion. I began writing, creating a comprehensive work titled Enoch's Forbidden Prophecy, when the Watchers revealed the Dragon Queen. In it, I presented the textual evidence from the Ethiopian Enoch and other sources, the pattern of a feminine teacher among the Watchers whose memory had been systematically suppressed, the practices she had taught for awakening the serpent power, and the reason her teaching had been declared the ultimate heresy, because it empowered women to be ungovernable, to refuse subordination, to claim their own divinity without permission or mediation. I taught that whether one understood the Watchers as literal angels or as symbols of an initiatory tradition, the Dragon Queen represented the perennial teaching that consciousness can awaken, that humans can become divine, that the serpent is teacher, not tempter, and that this knowledge has always been most threatening when it empowers women, because awakened women cannot be controlled, cannot be dominated, cannot be convinced they are less than fully divine. My final work was to create a modern mystery school dedicated to the Dragon Queen's teaching, offering practices for safely awakening Kundalini, for working with the serpent power she had revealed, for women especially to reclaim the sovereignty she had taught. On the school's founding night, I stood before a circle of women and some men who had committed to this path, and I spoke what I had come to know. The Dragon Queen was demonized because she taught what patriarchy could not tolerate, that women are meant to be sovereign, that the divine fire rises within our bodies, that we do not need permission from gods or men to awaken and become what we truly are. She was erased from the story of the Watchers, her name replaced with demons and temptresses, her teaching twisted into warnings about female danger and the need for male control. But the power she awakened cannot be permanently suppressed. It lives in every woman's spine as coiled potential, waiting to rise. And when it rises, when the Dragon Queen within awakens, we remember what they tried to make us forget, that we are not made to serve, but to create, not to submit, but to transform, not to remain unconscious, but to wake fully and claim our place as divine beings walking earth in human form. The Watchers fell, according to the story, but what if falling was really descending, deliberately choosing to come down to teach? And what if the Dragon Queen among them showed us that the true fall is not awakening but remaining asleep, not knowledge but ignorance, not sovereignty but submission? We remember her now, not as demon but as teacher, not as fallen but as descended to lift us up. And in remembering her we continue her work, awakening the dragon power she revealed, becoming sovereign as she taught, and proving that what was forbidden was not evil but the key to our liberation. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.